Hi guys, this is LAS number 6 in General Chemistry 1, entitled Chemical Compounds Formula, Structural Formula, and Models. So again, this is a run-through of the activity sheet provided by the school's Division of Batangas to General Chemistry 1 students in senior high school. Starting off with the background information for learners, let's try to find out what a chemical formula is. We already have a review of this chemical formula in your first week of general chemistry. Again, chemical formula is a symbolic expression of a compound or a substance. Define a shorthand of expressing the types and the number of atoms in a substance. When you say name, it's the scientific name given to a chemical in accordance with the nomenclature system developed by the IUPAC or International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. If we have a chemical formula, we also have what we call a structural formula, to which it is a graphical representation of the molecular structure showing how the atoms are possibly arranged in real three-dimensional space. Okay, so given a chemical formula, we can make a structure of that formula, which is a 3D space representation of the molecule given chemical. So let's recall what a compound is. If we have two or more atoms joined together by a chemical bond, we call that a compound. And the compound can be classified into what we call ionic and covalent. When we say ionic, it's a combination of a metal and a non-metal atom. This is the strongest of the bonds formed between a metal and a non-metal. An example of which is sodium chloride, which is made up of sodium, metal, and a non-metal chlorine. For a covalent compound, this is formed between two or more non-metal atoms. And the type of intramolecular bond that exists between atoms is covalent bond. Okay? Example of this is carbon tetrachloride, a combination of carbon and 4 chlorine atoms. Carbon is a non-metal, chlorine is also a non-metal, so it is a covalent compound. Now, there are different steps in writing a structural formula. First, we can draw the Lewis structure, okay, of each element. Okay. Next, compare up and paired electrons, determine the number of bonds in the molecule. We choose a central atom and we draw the structural formula. And this is also a matter of familiarity about the different compounds and find out which ones are combined or are bonded to one another. So let's try an example here. So the first thing that we're going to do here is doing the structural formula of methane. A methane is a gas composed of carbon and hydrogen gas attached to the central atom carbon. Okay, so the carbon atom here is the central atom, while the hydrogen are called the terminal atoms. Carbon is in group number 4 in the periodic table of elements, and so there are 4 valence electrons. These are the valence electrons outside the carbon atom. For these 4 valence electrons, since this is CH4, we have to attach 4 hydrogen atoms to it. 1 atom of carbon and 4 hydrogen atoms. So we will have to connect this showing the bonds are formed between carbon and hydrogen. So this is the structural formula of CH4 or methane gas. Okay? Now, let's try to do the activities here. Well, this is just picture analysis for activity 1. You're in trial for activity number 2. How many atoms are there in BR308? Since a chemical formula also tells us the number of atoms by the subscripts given for each element, we can find out how many of these atoms are present in the compound. This is Br for bromine and O for oxygen element or atom. So there are 3 bromine atoms and 8 oxygen atoms. All in all, there are 11 atoms of tribromo octoxide. Okay, so this is tribromine octaoxide. So what compound is being formed between a metal atom and a non-metal atom? The answer is an ionic compound. The symbolic expression of a what do you call? What do you call? Okay, let's remove the ed to a symbolic expression of a compound or substance. So that's a formula and so on. So these are just questions that you can answer by reading the background information. Okay. Also, in activity number 3, take it. What's in? Read the background information to answer the questions. This is boron trifluoride. Boron is the central atom, and there are 3 fluorine atoms as terminal atoms. Now, so going to the engagement, so there are here the different compounds, and you will have to draw a ball and stick model of the structural formula for each of the chemical names. You can try to find the answers in the internet and research on how the bonds are formed between the different compounds here. For activity number 5, I can do something. Please read the instructions carefully. And then for activity number 6, you have here some questions that you can answer based on the activities that you have already done. Then completing the table here for the different chemicals or the chemical formula here on the left side, while the chemical name on the second column. Structural formula, ionic or covalent. Again, to find out if it's covalent or ionic, you have to check if the elements present are the metals and non-metals. That gives you ionic compound. If they're both non-metals, then that's covalent compound. Okay, so pretty short for LAS number 6. And you also have the answers. You try to answer these first before looking at the answer key.